Time to talk about the Denver Broncos and time to go over once again the head coaching search that they're looking for. And they're going to talk to Sean Payton on Tuesday and all the stuff that we already know with this team. Like, it's part of that hurry up and get there type of status for the Denver Broncos. Orange and blue today. Cecil Lammey hoped to be soon joined by one Andrew Mason. And yeah, it's kind of rinse repeat with the Broncos and the conversation surrounding this head coaching search. Now the search takes place with more Sean Payton. And May said something we already talked about. So I just started the show saying, like, this is rinse and repeat time. This is me being impatient time, although I know patience is a must because it might be a couple more weeks before this thing gets done.
Yeah, honestly, I think the David Shaw stuff from last night's more interesting to talk about here than just getting the scheduling down. We knew the Broncos were going to be first with Sean Payton. They are. They're gonna lead off on Tuesday, and then Payton's gonna talk to Arizona, gonna talk to Houston. I think it's entirely possible the job Sean Payton takes is not yet open. We're gonna get more clarity on that this weekend, specifically from what happens with Sean McVay. May learn the next few days. What happens with the Los Angeles Chargers against the Jaguars? What happens with the Dallas Cowboys when they go down to Tampa on Monday night? So that the landscape is shifting. But Shaw is interesting on a lot of levels, not only because I think there's a few things going on here. Number one, I think you've got 3 Stanford people that are in the interview process for the Broncos: Condoleezza Rice and Greg Penner and Kerry Walton Penner, both of whom have master's degrees from Stanford. So part of this is getting David Shaw on NFL radars. But I think part of this is also potential contingency plan. If you don't get Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton and you go to the next tier, I think he's very much in play. And another thing could be, if you get Jim Harbaugh, David Shaw might have a huge role on the staff. He's been Jim Harbaugh's offensive coordinator before at Stanford. He was even his pass game coordinator at the University of San Diego for the Toreros back in 2006. So there's a pretty profound connection between David Shaw and Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, and the Shaw thing for me is interesting because people need to remember Mike Munchak interviewed for the head coaching job and then took the offensive line job when they hired Vic Fangio. So it could be a similar thing with perhaps a better relationship, obviously, because of their connection from long ago. So it's just another good name, quality name that this ownership group is going through and going towards. And again, it doesn't mean that he's their top choice, and it doesn't mean that he'll even be their head coach. He could be some sort of offensive coordinator or something like that if Jim Harbaugh is hired.
Yeah, and I think that would actually be the perfect step for David Shaw, because every indication is he wants to get back in the NFL. He had 9 years of experience as an assistant coach. I mean, and that's where, like, I think if Jim Harbaugh is the coach, the composition of the staff might be fascinating, because I could see a staff that includes multiple college coaches that people know. For example, I mean, you go back to his San Francisco staff. He had a guy who did come through CU briefly as an assistant coach, but was a 13-year college head coach down at USF, and that was Jim Leavitt serving as his linebackers coach. Jim Harbaugh likes a really experienced staff. A name that I would keep an eye on if Jim Harbaugh becomes the coach is Paul Chryst, the former Wisconsin head coach, who was Russell Wilson's QB coach and play caller at Wisconsin back in 2011. And things went askew for Paul Chryst at Wisconsin for some of the same reasons they went astray for David Shaw at Stanford. It was a tough environment with NIL and the transfer portal. It's a different game in college football than it has been, and it favors of those who are better salespeople rather than just pure good football coaches. David Shaw is a really good pure football coach. Paul Chryst is a really good pure football coach. But when you got to kind of re-recruit your roster every year, it takes a different skill set now to succeed in college football. So I think we may see multiple coaches on Jim Harbaugh's staff who were successful in the past college environment, but maybe not as successful with it going forward, and they want to get in the NFL. And that would be a good thing. I think you might be looking at whether it's Harbaugh or Sean Payton, I think the notion of an all-star staff is a very realistic possibility. Quite the contrast from last year.
Just look at what CU's done with Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders, the recruiter, is much more important than Deion Sanders, the X's and O's guy. X's and O's are going to be fine, baby. It's that recruiting.
Right. You know what? You look at the people he's bringing in. You can, if, for example, if Mike Zimmer joins the staff, Mike Zimmer coached Deion Sanders back in the day in Dallas as a position coach. You trust the X's and O's to those guys. And Coach Prime's going to recruit, going to get out there, recruit, and sell the program. That's so really, like, it was already different from college to pro football in terms of the job description. Now, I mean, I'm not sure how much college football and the NFL in terms of being a head coach are alike at all, except that the ball is an oblong spheroid, right?
Right.
Aside from that, two completely different job descriptions. And like someone like David Shaw, I think if he came to the Broncos and was an assistant coach, I think it'd be phenomenal. I would also say enjoy it while you can. I think he'll become somebody's NFL head coach very soon.
Well, I hate to fast forward it because I haven't even hired this guy, Mace, but imagine this. David Shaw jumps on board with Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh does his thing for 4 or 5 years, goes away, which Harbaugh may do, and David Shaw's your head coach in waiting. Now, it may not take that long for him to get a head coaching opportunity, but like, yeah, you could hire him now and then have him as your head coach in 4 years or whatever the number is. And I'm okay with Harbaugh doing that, by the way, just like I am with Deion when everyone tries to make fun of me because I got a Deion Sanders sweatshirt. He's going to be gone in 2 years. Yeah, it's going to be great for 2 years. It's going to be fun for 2 years. I don't care about after that. For Harbaugh, yeah, he's only going to stick around 4 or 5 years. And they'll be playoff contenders for 4 or 5 years, probably wind up in a Super Bowl.
What you hope is that he leaves the Broncos, if it's 4 or 5 years, that he leaves them in better shape than he left San Francisco. That was one thing. Now, that's where the administration and everything, that's where it comes into play. I mean, we can, there's a lot you can say about Trent Baalke, for example. Trent Baalke rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and Trent Baalke has made some mistakes in Jacksonville. He's also done some good things in Jacksonville, too. It certainly helps that you have the number 1 overall pick in a year where you had a generational quarterback prospect. Yes, Trevor Lawrence is generational. He's showing it right now. So, I mean, that's hard to screw up. But at the same time, I mean, Trent Baalke was also there when they hired Urban Meyer, even though I think Urban Meyer was more of a Shad Khan move than a Trent Baalke move. Right. And Baalke probably shouldn't be blamed for that. But
yeah. And he wasn't. It was actually kept on board, which surprised me in a way, especially when you had head coaching candidates being like, nah, I don't want to be there with Trent Baalke.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I actually think the George Paton, Jim Harbaugh pairing might have potential and might work. I think part of it, we know that George Paton is friends with John Harbaugh, so there's already a relationship there with the family. And Paton, his personality is a little more kind of amenable, shall I say, than that of Trent Baalke. And maybe this has a chance to work and not have the same kind of butting heads and friction that existed in San Francisco for Jim Harbaugh.
Right. And I'm not one of those people that are against George Paton sticking around. I don't think he does at this moment. We don't know who the head coach is yet, but I'm one of those, let George Paton do what George Paton needs to do. And we could have the conversation, especially with the way that it was promoted video wise and the fantastic job, Broncos behind the scenes or whatever. I want my GM at every all-star game, at every pro day. Like, that's what I want my GM to do. And I know that's what George Paton wants to do. Like, the head coaching search probably distracted him last year from making some better decisions. And yes, every GM misses. I'm not going to get in that conversation, but I'm also in the group or the camp of, let George Paton be a GM. Let him be a scout. Let him get back to doing that. And yeah, it can work. And we'll see if the new head coach wants it to work.
It's funny you talk about kind of the behind the scenes stuff from the Broncos.
Right.
Have you noticed we're not seeing any of that this year?
Yeah.
The Broncos last year, every time they completed an interview with a coaching candidate, they would put out a tweet saying, and we've completed our interview with Luke Getsy, Nathaniel Hackett, Eric Bieniemy, Dan Quinn, yada, yada, yada. None of that. Officially, they are operating in stealth. And I mean, we didn't even learn about the David Shaw interview until after it happened.
Right.
They are so a completely different mentality for this. And frankly, while I thought the Broncos did a tremendous job peeling back the curtain a little bit and allowing the public to see after the fact some of what went on in those interviews with the Behind the Broncos series. In retrospect, because it turned out so badly for the team and so badly for Nathaniel Hackett, it kind of backfires. I mean, go back and watch the stuff that they did on Nathaniel Hackett, like the clips from the interview and then him taking the job. And man, it's kind of painful to look at, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And another thing about that, beyond being painful, you start looking at things that they showed Hackett saying, like in terms of they showed clips from the interview that he had with the Broncos. And it's like, and he got away from some foundational things of what he said he was going to do. It was talk, but the action didn't really back it up in the way that you wanted it to. It underscores the massive disappointment of what this year was, of what the staff was. I mean, we're listen to the names that we're tossing out here. If Jim Harbaugh is the coach for potential staff, right? We're talking about Vic Fangio and Jim Leavitt and Paul Christ and David Shaw. These are all guys that, as John Fox would say, they got skins on the wall, right?
Lots of them.
Yes. It wasn't the case with last year's Broncos staff, and I think it really helped undermine and undo what they hoped to accomplish that year.
Yeah, it would have been different if he had some more veteran coaches on his staff, but I digress. I'm okay with them moving in stealth, Mace. It's more like regular NFL teams do, and they had some PR to do last year. Certainly, it seemed like an arm of the PR department, which it is. Any sort of video working for the team, as you know, it pretty much is.
I've lived that for a long time, Cecil. You know all about that.
Yeah, to me, the ultimate PR is the W column. Like, Broncos fans will be there for you. Yeah, there you go, Wisconsin. Broncos fans will be there for you. We know that. You win, and it'll be an avalanche, pun intended, of just support and love. And you see it, Russell Wilson tweeting about Pat Surtain being named All-Pro. And I read through some of the comments. Twitter's a cesspool. It always has been.
Facebook's worse.
Yeah. YouTube's the bottom of the barrel. But anyway, like about 70% of the comments were like, love you, Russ. You could bounce back, Russ. Like 75% of the comments were like really positive. So it's there, man. Just win. We don't need to see. And Behind the Broncos was great.
It was.
We don't need to see any of that.
Yeah. Look, the positive reinforcement. Just look and listen to the crowd on Sunday. Those fans, they had 13,000 announced no-shows. I maintain it was probably a little bit more than that. It looked more like it was closer to 20,000 no-shows. Those 55,000 people who were there, they were in that team's corner. And they were in Russ's corner as well. They weren't, they weren't booing Russ. They were supporting him. Listen to the ovation he gets as he's leaving the field after the game. People want to believe in him, and they want to believe in this team. And it's amazing. After 6 consecutive losing seasons, there are some that kind of say, yeah, I'm getting apathetic. You know what, though? Most people, there's still hope. There's still belief, right?
Yeah.
Belief in this team.
They can say they don't care, but they're lying.
Right. They do. They want so badly to get this right.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm thankful for it, because the passion of this fan base is the reason why I've been able to, and same for you, we've been able to put food on the table and pay rent and mortgage and all that, talking about this and writing about this, right?
Right.
People still believe, it's not dead. It's not dead. It's not dead.
No, not at all.
The heart of Broncos country is still beating.
There you go. Huey Lewis. Yeah, that's
Uh,
right. Dom wants to know, Jim C or Jim H, who gets the most production out of the offensive line, and Russ.
ooh,
It's interesting. It's
I,
interesting.
I can I answer both? I mean, that's tough because I think they'll both get results.
Well, I
It's
think Caldwell's
yeah,
results will result in Russell being faster with the ball or faster with the read or better setup for him, which makes the
yeah,
offensive line look better.
yeah. Whereas with Harbaugh, it's going to be more. Let's build the offensive lineup. Let's run the
Toughness.
ball. Let's provide the support, and then Russ is working with an offense that has multiple threats that can keep a defense off guard, and it'll open up shots for him downfield. It's basically two different paths to the same endpoint. The endpoint being Russell Wilson is succeeding, and if he's succeeding, the team's succeeding.
Yeah.
And everybody
Swink
who's interviewing for the
McLeod.
job knows it. Yeah. I
What
love
a
the
name. Swink
that is
McLeod.
something.
Yeah. Apathetic here with hope. Yeah.
What
We hear you.
yeah. I would say for a long time that would describe the fan base of the Cleveland Browns. And remember the Browns, their fans famously did a parade around the stadium when they went 0-16. It was like 9 degrees, and I think like 5,000 people showed up just to have a parade for 0-16. That's apathetic with hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Broncos country, we're there. We feel you, man. We understand.
Yeah. Yeah. It's oh man, but it's endemic to passionate football towns. Cleveland is a passionate football town. I love Cleveland for that reason. Denver is a passionate football town. I love Denver for that reason as well. Not every town is like that. I mean,
no, not at all.
And I should say pro football town, because I'm not sure how passionate a pro football town Houston is, but they've been beaten down. Like, I think if you're a Houston football fan, you had Bud Adams, and then you had the team leave, and then Bob McNair did a good job, but now you have Cal McNair, who just that dude. I mean, does he?
Well,
even have
who
a
said it in
freaking
the
clue?
chat earlier? Like, ownership matters.
Mm-hmm.
Ownership matters. It might have been Wardell who said it earlier. Like, I understand it was Wardell. He said, I understand why having good ownership is so important. Yep.
I can say this as somebody. I mean, you look over my shoulder and you see a Buccaneers 2002 Super Bowl pennant there. Ownership matters because the penurious, which is a fancy way of saying cheap, Hugh Culverhouse passed away. The team got sold to the Glazer family, and the Glazers poured in resources to it. And the Bucs, they've had ups and downs, yeah, but they have committed ownership that got results. And it changed it changed how fervently that town supported that team, right? I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there weren't many Bucs fans in school with me growing up. I was one of the few kids that was wearing, the old Florida orange. Everyone else was pulling for the 49ers or the Giants or whoever, right? Well,
bunch of jerks.
Yeah, that's not the case anymore, and it wasn't the case even before Tom Brady came back. Ownership does matter. That's what ownership can do. Look what Pat Bowlen did around here for a long time as well, and look at the positive signs that we're seeing from the Walton Penner Group. I mean, this is $400,000 three-sod a field for one game, right? $100 million on a stadium that they may not be in that 8 or 9 years from now, but they still want to make it right at this moment. Eating over 3 years of a coach's contract because he just wasn't good enough.
Right.
The commitment is there. Now, the difference between this and Pat Bowlen is it's backed up by pretty unlimited financial resources. Pat Bowlen, when he owned the team, you ever see the different, like, I think it's Chris Rock, Rich and Wealthy?
Yeah, it was Chris Rock. Like, Shaq is rich. The owner of the Magic is wealthy.
Right. Pat Bowlen is rich. The Walton Penner Group, wealthy.
Big time difference there.
Yes.
Big time difference. But it gives you hope that they'll find the right way, because money is not an object. And that's not going to be an excuse for them. Now you have to find the right people but I believe Mace, and maybe I'm wide-eyed or blind to the fact or whatever. Cecil does mean blind, by the way, in Old English.
What?
Yeah, I wish it meant like great warrior or something, but yes, Cecil in Old English means blind. So here comes someone in the chat room to bring up Paxton Lynch. But anyway, like,
well, you know what Andrew means?
What does Andrew mean?
It's from ancient Greek. It means manly as well as brave, strong, courageous, warrior. Damn right.
Yes. Yeah. See, you're the courageous warrior. I'm the blind one. So
I'll lead you, Cecil.
Okay. Well, I always say love is blind. Love is blind. So I'm like love, right? Well, I love the Walton Penner Group, and I think that they will find the right people and get out the way. That's the second step.
Yes.
The first step is finding the right people. The second step is getting out the way and letting those people get to work. And I believe they will. There's no indications right now to say that they're going to be in the way and they're going to be Dan Snyder, Jerry Jones, or, you know, any sort of problem like that. Yeah. So we'll see. Time will tell, but I have faith that they will find the right people. Money's not an object, and then they will move out of the way.
Right. And that's what some owners struggle to do. I would argue, for example, that like David Tepper in Carolina, it's another dude that's wealthy, right? Mm-hmm. He struggled to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And the team has struggled as a result. Resources are not an issue there in Charlotte, North Carolina, but getting out of the way is. But a good example of an owner who got out of the way is Bob Kraft.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, if I had to place a bet on what things will end up looking like for the Walton Penner Group and their stewardship of the team, I think it's going to look a lot like Robert Kraft in New England.
Okay.
That's a good model to have.
So you'll back me up when I said dynasty.
Yeah. Well, you know what you need for a dynasty?
Wins.
QB.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. Like, you can have really good ownership, but you still need the QB as well. Like, that's and a great QB is a great deodorant for a lot of things too. I would argue that one of the things that was a deodorant for the issues that were starting to develop within the Broncos organization was Peyton Manning.
Yeah, Peyton Manning, you could almost blame him because he covered up so many smells when he was gone. You're like, wow, this team really stinks. This part really over here stinks. And it was offensive line. I mean, God bless all of our friends who played on that offensive line. And but Peyton Manning covered up for him. He just did. And then he goes away and you're like, oh no. Yeah, organizationally as well too.
Like I can speak kind of for the business side of things. You know, we actually there was a wing of the UC Health Trading Center that got renovated, and I jokingly but seriously called it the wing that Peyton built, because all of a sudden the revenues, the premium seat revenues, the suites, etc., the sponsorships, all that went up because Peyton Manning was in the building, and we have more revenue coming in. So that's what I mean by that. Now, to the credit, I will give credit to Joe Ellis and his stewardship of the team for not simply pocketing that money and putting the money back into the organization. But you know, there were some things to fix organizationally, and you know, and that's why fix. And there are changes coming, and we've already seen some organization changes. We're going to see more in the coming months in all likelihood. It's just kind of the way of things.
It's the way of things, the way it's going to be. So we're going to be here for you Monday through Friday, 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And again, Mace, it's the waiting game.
Mm-hmm.
It's the waiting game. But we're
going to keep doing these shows 5 days a week, but we're just going to be sitting around waiting here. And this weekend is going to be kind of very much waiting, because what you see right now is, even though if they wanted to hire Jim Harbaugh today, they could, because they've complied with the Rooney Rule. The Jim Caldwell and David Shaw interviews put them in compliance for the two external minority candidates that you need to comply with that. But they are, I believe, going to do due diligence and let this thing play out and talk to everybody next week. And I think that's fair. I mean, look, if Jim Harbaugh gets a little shaky about it, then you know what? Maybe he wasn't the right person, but then maybe David Shaw is. And I mean, David Shaw might be tough to sell, like in terms of like, is he a sexy hire? But I think he'd be a very good hire. I think his issues, and I know there are some like college football people are saying like, oh, yeah, why is, if you're saying you like Davy Shaw, you didn't pay attention to college football. Well, no, I did pay attention to college football, but I also know that what was going on at Stanford was bigger than David Shaw, and that again, everybody's learning about the new landscape of college football. There's not a template for it, but what we're starting to bit by bit find out what works and what doesn't. I credit, for example, at Wisconsin, the administration making a pretty hard decision on a loyal alum like Paul Chryst, who had been mostly successful, but was not well suited for where college football was going. And they made a preemptive move on him. And now they have Luke Fickell, who I think is there's a dynamic nature to him that suits being a college football head coach. And someone like Paul Chryst is going to end up in a better spot. But we're all everyone in college football is figuring out this landscape, and it may mean that some really good coaches end up going to the NFL who might have stayed in college football otherwise. I mean, someone like David Shaw, I think will be a very good NFL head coach. In fact, in retrospect, one wonders if maybe he doesn't regret kind of pursuing some of the opportunities that were bountiful for him several years ago when Stanford's a perennial top 12 team. They finished number 3 in the country one year. You wonder if on some level he doesn't regret going to the NFL at that point, because he was considered a very hot candidate at that moment. And now he's got to kind of rebuild himself a little bit.
Life, just like football, Mace, because football is life, is all about timing. What's the timing like? And let's take, for example, a Derek Carr situation.
Yeah,
that's a timing issue with Derek Carr. It's like, okay, he thought he'd retire a Raider, and the timing isn't there for him. Now the Raiders are exploring trade options. I'm like, everyone knows they're going to get released, so trade what? Like,
well,
just wait.
It depends. The reason why there might be trade options is that you may have a team that says, I don't want to risk the open market. Let's try to get him right now. That's the thing, because are there going to be multiple suitors for Carr? Yeah.
Yep.
He's an upgrade for a lot of teams. I mean, if you're Tampa Bay and you're staring down the barrel of Tom Brady no longer being there, of course you're going to take a look at Derek Carr. If you're Baltimore and you might be moving on from Lamar Jackson, he'd make a lot of sense. Washington, even though I thought Sam Howell showed a lot of promise in his one start, you might feel a little bit better about Derek Carr in there. There are a lot of teams that are going to be taking a long look at him, and that's why they might be able to get a trade for him, because a team may say, oh, do I want to roll the dice on the open market, or do I want to get this done right now? So it's a supply and demand thing. But I'll tell you, happiest to see Derek Carr move on from the Raiders, your Denver Broncos.
The Derek Carr killer.
6 Raiders wins in a row in the series. And actually, if we go back further, the Broncos have not won a road game against the Raiders since 2015. 7 consecutive road losses in Oakland and Las Vegas. Okay. Broncos country should be ecstatic that Derek Carr's out of the division, because for whatever reason, he always did really well. There's a reason why Vic Fangio, in his last press conference as a Broncos head coach, when he talked about why it was so tough, hey, like the other 3 teams have top shelf quarterbacks. Now, maybe Carr isn't Patrick Mahomes, but he's very solidly, I think, in that second tier of quarterbacks with whom you can win.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Matthew Stafford vibes,
Oh,
Stafford with the Lions, Stafford with the Rams.
I think if you get Carr in a little bit better situation, yeah, no reason why he can't go somewhere and take a team to the Super Bowl. You can win with Derek Carr. You can win big with Derek Carr. personally speaking, as someone who grew up a Bucks fan, I'd like to see him in Tampa Bay. But there's some cap gymnastics involved. But I'd feel much better about their chances of trying to keep this thing afloat in the post-Tom Brady era if they could get Carr in red and pewter. But that's just me. I'd love to. And also, I like Carr. I'd kind of like to cheer for him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can't cheer for him when he's a Raider, right?
No.
Stinking
He's the ultimate
Raider.
villain.
Can't do that. I'd like to pull for him personally. So go someplace where I can say, yeah, let's get it done, because he's a quality quarterback and a quality human being.
Two of my favorite players of all time went to the Raiders, and it made me stop cheering for him for like a year or two. It was Eric Dickerson and then Pat Swilling. I love Pat Swilling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then he went to Oakland. Were they Oakland then? Whatever. And I was like, damn it.
That was after Detroit, right?
That was after Detroit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He was still good in Detroit. He wasn't very good with the Raiders.
I want to say he may have even made a Pro Bowl with Detroit, like one of those times.
I believe he did. Yes.
He was he still brought it.
Yep.
Back in the
speaking of Vic Fangio, right? Dome Patrol, 17 sacks in 91 or whatever it was, 92.
Best 3-4 linebacker group in NFL history. Vaughn Johnson, Pat Swilling, Ricky Jackson,
Sam Mills,
and of course Sam Mills. I saved the best for last.
All right.
Which is no offense to Ricky Jackson, but
Hall of Famer Ricky Jackson.
Yeah, but Sam Mills Sam Mills should have been a Hall of Famer long before.
My sister texted in Lyle Alzado. She's like, when Lyle Alzado went to the Raiders. There's old school, right?
That's a good call. That's a good pull. Went to Cleveland and then went on to the Los Angeles Raiders. I believe that I don't think he was ever an Oakland Raider.
Right.
Oh man, I'm trying. Who else? Did you see? It happens for me in baseball a lot because I'll see somebody end up playing as a Braves fan. I'll see somebody end up playing for the Mets or the Phillies, and I'll be like, well, they're dead to me.
Yeah. All right, chat room. It's on you. Send us your comments now. And as always, we appreciate everyone for watching Orange and Blue today. This off season is going to give us plenty to talk about, plenty of interviews, I feel like Mr. Ballin, plenty of interviews. That's all we do here is talk about the Broncos. That's a YouTube deep pull, by the way. Mm-hmm. If you like true crime stories, I think he was a Navy SEAL. And now he has a YouTube channel. His name is Mr. Ballin.
Okay.
Ballen. He just sits around in flannel and tells you ghost stories and murder stories and stuff. It's pretty cool.
I'm not a true crime fan, but my wife is.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll check it out.
I may have to show that to her.
Go down that YouTube wormhole.
Yeah, I was on a YouTube wormhole of old football games. A couple of nights ago, I fell asleep to the sounds of the Houston Oilers at the Detroit Lions from 1986. They both sucked. I mean, not even a game between two good teams, two bad teams playing in a half-empty Silverdome.
Okay, there you go. That's what we do.
My wormholes are all sports. Gosh, what other game was I was watching? This is how old. The St. Louis Football Cardinals. I was watching a St. Louis Football Cardinals game against the Dallas Cowboys from 1987, and the Texas Stadium was barely half full because people were down on the Cowboys at that point.
Here's a good one from Roger before out of here. Disliking Wes Welker with the Patriots and then liking him with the Broncos. That's perfect.
This is why Jerry Seinfeld famously said that we're all just rooting for laundry, because you hate a player with another team, but then he comes to your team and you love him, right? It's the same person. They just put on different clothes.
Right.
So, yeah, you're rooting for laundry. You're not rooting for players. You're not rooting for teams. You're rooting for the uniform, right?
Reminds me of that Bugs Bunny where that train wrecked or whatever had a bunch of hats falling down off the bridge, and he would wear a different hat and be a different personality.
Yes.
So
yeah, Wes Welker comes. Hey, we love Welker.
Where's that big helmet at?
Yes. Oh man.
Here's another one. See, our chat room's too good. David Neil Smith. Oh,
that's a great pull. Steve Atwater helped recruit Neil Smith to Denver. Back in 1997. That was huge. Of all the moves, remember you had a lot of guys going from one AFC West team to another in those days.
Mm-hmm.
You had Neil Smith, Remember Darian Gordon went from the Chargers to the Broncos and was an amazing punt returner. It was fun in the AFC West in those days because you had a lot of guys that were moving around within the division.
Rod Bernstein from the Chargers to the Broncos.
Right. Rich Gannon went from the Chiefs to the Raiders.
Yep.
And won an MVP with their Oakland Raiders.
I've always said, Mason, you'll remember the year better than I. If the Chiefs would have played Rich Gannon instead of Elvis Gerbach, Broncos might not have won that playoff game in KC.
You're talking about 1997 or actually January 98. Yep.
I agree. Rich Gannon plays that game. It's a whole different ball game. Sorry, Broncos fans. That's my belief.
With all respect to Elvis Gerbach, he was that dude that always came up small when it mattered the most.
Right.
And Rich Gannon, yeah, he had a bad Super Bowl with the Raiders a few years later, but he had some big playoff games too. Like that you changed history at that point because maybe the Broncos never win it at all. If they lose that playoff game, how devastated is John Elway? Does he think, oh, maybe I'm just going to stop pushing the boulder up the hill?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Jacksonville lost, then the Kansas City lost. Like things could be different.
That would have, oh my gosh, that's.
Mm-hmm.
There are times when I just think of sitting down and writing like an alternate history of the NFL or an alternate history of the Broncos.
Right.
Stuff like that. Like
the Raheem Moore play, do an alternate history on that. Like Tony Carter actually gives good coverage.
Well, you can read all about that day at denversports.com right now because I wrote about it. I look back at some of the stuff I wrote 10 years about it, and I listened to what Brandon Stokely said on the radio today because he was on talking about it with Stoke and Zach. The term that Stoke used was, quote, absolute disaster, unquote, to describe that day. That turned out to be Stoke's last game as a Bronco because to bring up a guy we just talked about, they signed Wes Welker, and there was no room at the inn for Brandon Stokely and moved on. Actually went back to Baltimore the following year. So when the Ravens came back in week 1 and the Broncos stomped them and Peyton threw 7 touchdown passes, it was Stoke that was on the other sideline as he went back to Baltimore for a final stint.
Julius Thomas in that breakout game, baby. Talked about him for 3 years before he did anything. And then he did everything for 2 years. So,
and he got paid by Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, a lot of guys got paid by Jacksonville back in those days.
Well, hey, look at this year. Speaking of Trent Baalke, like look at the Evan Ingram move. He's just overpaying. Like that worked. Christian Kirk, they're overpaying. That worked. So Baalke doesn't do everything right, but there's some moves with Jacksonville that put them in the spot where they're at now.
They played it well with a cost-controlled quarterback. That's what you do.
Yep.
You're not paying the QB, so you pay the weapons around him. And that helps that quarterback develop. And then a few years from now, when the roles are reversed and you're paying Trevor Lawrence, which I feel pretty safe in saying he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid big time by the Jaguars, and he's not going to go anywhere. But by then, his development has reached a point where he's going to make his receivers better. And that's how it works. And that's the cycle of NFL life, It's exciting to watch Jacksonville, and the other thing, and we're going way too long. I'm sorry, but I did say when the Broncos beat them in week 2 of 2021, Lawrence's second start, I did say get your shots in on these guys now because this isn't going to last. And the thing, as bad and chaotic as everything was with Urban Meyer in 2021. You could see 2 or 3 high-level throws from Trevor Lawrence every game. It was you could tell he had it. He just needed a functional environment around him. He gets it, and lo and behold, he ends up having a first-year to second-year transformation that might be the most profound since a guy named Peyton Manning went from setting the rookie record for interceptions as a rookie to leading the Colts to a 13-3 season the following year.
Sometimes patience. Mm-hmm. It's necessary. We appreciate y'all with the 40-minute show today. This will make up for all the 20-minute shows I did earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. To say we
got you.
Yeah, nothing to talk about. Oh, we just, nothing's changed. Balderdash. We can find plenty of stuff.
Oh yeah. And then July will be gone. But either way, until then, Plenty to talk about.
Yep.
Plenty to talk about. He's Andrew Mason. Follow him on Twitter at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey. Don't follow me. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned, and please, as always, stay frosty.